Did you have any ahas, out of those conversations that, I didn't really think about that in terms of culture because you never ran into the situation yourself, or it was just a novel idea that isn't really included with most culture type conversations. Anything of that fell out for you?
A couple of different areas, and like part of that is when you're identifying your values that matter. It's like kind of WD-40, part of their value is the memories, making memories, and
Mm.
and that kind of thing. Like I would have never thought of that probably as a value for that company to begin with. And so I think, to me, that was kind of one of those aha moments, that when we're really coming down with what are our core values for this organization going to be, like what do we want to be known for, like, it's not the who, what, when, where. It is the why are we doing this kind of thing, like why are we what is the difference that we're going to make. And we need to make sure that we're really doing that kind of deep look and look at it, because that is where the connections are made with people. That is where the
Hmm.
connections come from your employees. And so I'd say focusing on that, your values are not necessarily, oh, productivity is going to be XYZ this month, or like those are values that you need to meet your productivity goals and different things like that. But don't forget that some of the bigger picture pieces of that, the things that connect people to you and why you're doing the work.
Hello, and welcome to the Generate Your Value podcast. I'm your co host, Andy McDowell, founder and owner of Generate Your Value, providing self leadership, and business coaching services for corporate executives and business owners.
And I'm Zach Levy, your other co-host. I run a nationwide financial service business with my wife, Megan.
Together, Zach and I have the intention to bring you tips, concepts, ideas, suggestions, stories, and analogies from A to Z, which will help you to grow your personal brand and leadership skills in such a way that joy, happiness, and success, as you define it for yourself, are achieved.
We hope to use our gifts, talents, and experiences in business and leadership to generate value in your life. And with that being said, let's move to our topic for today.
Hello, and welcome to the Generate Your Value podcast. My name is Andy McDowell. I'm your host today on the podcast, and I can't thank you enough for taking that valuable resource of yours called time to spend with us today. Today is going to be one of my favorite topics in business as well as in life. And when you hear the term, a lot of the times you immediately go to the arts and some things in life. But the reality is the word culture plays in so many different areas in the world. It plays in business, it plays in life, it plays in art, like I mentioned, and so forth. But it tends to be one of these gray things. Everybody knows it's kind of out there, but nobody can really put their finger on it and kind of touch it. Because it is and it has so many facets. It's almost like a diamond, right? It's got so many facets to it with this term culture that I think we're going to have an easy time filling up 45, 50 minutes worth of conversation on this topic. And my guest today is my first guest that on a one-on-one basis is coming back for a second time. And she's a local. She's just on the other side of the city from me here in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Her name is Chellie Phillips, and she does a lot of work, particularly in the utility market, but also other industries from a business coaching perspective, a culture perspective, a company employee engagement perspective. And she just last year came out with a book. I really like the way that she put it together. It's called Culture Secrets, and I have the distinct honor of being asked by Chellie to do a recommendation on the book when she launched, which I'm eternally honored and grateful for. But as I typically do, let me remind you, for those that are listening to Chellie for the second time, what her bio is. For those that are new to Chellie, it'll give you some background, and then we'll bring her in and get to know her a little bit more and talk about this important topic. Like I said, kind of nebulous, but important topic called culture. So Chelle's bio reads, Chellie Phillips is a Southern sweet tea sipping seasoned professional who has spent over 25 years in the utility industry working to build people-centered cultures. That's important. Remember that promote success and growth for both employees and businesses. She's a coach, corporate trainer, motivational speaker, and international best-selling author. Her books include Culture Secrets, When in Doubt, Delete It, and Get Noticed, Get Hired. And she's recently expanded into the children's literary market with her Susie the Detective series, designed to encourage children to be problem solvers and recognize the unique talents of others. Chelle's received numerous state and national awards for excellent communication and public relations skills, including the 2022 LaBerge Award for Strategic Communications, and presented on stage for various organizations on topics related to workplace culture and employee development. And I think I'm going to stop there. Chelle's one of those people whose bio can go a page and a half. But I know you're not here to listen to a full bio. You actually want to meet the person. So, Chellie, welcome back to the Generate Your Value podcast. Can't thank you enough for coming back. Obviously, I did an okay job with you that you were willing to come back.
Absolutely. I'm tickled to be here today. And, anybody asks me to talk about one of my favorite topics, it's hard for me to say no.
Yeah, know the feeling. Know the feeling. So, maybe before we dive into culture, if you could spend maybe just 2, 3, 4 minutes, remind folks that haven't heard you talk in a while and so forth, what your background is like and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So I came up actually in the world of journalism. That was what my degree was in. So, um, early on, I thought of myself as a storyteller. And what that did for me was really got me invested in learning what made people who they were, why they made the decisions that they made. And I think throughout the course of that, it's really taught me how to really engage with people, how to build strong teams, and really how to listen and find out what matters to people. And then,
Mm-hmm.
when you translate that into the corporate world, you know, I was a features editor at a daily paper for a while, and then I just moved into the corporate PR side, and that's really telling the story of an organization
Mm-hmm.
and getting people. How do I connect an organization with somebody? And that in itself is really connecting with the values that matter to each of you. Are you representing the same things? Do you have things that people care about in common? And then after being in that world for so long and moving up through the leadership ranks and everything, having my own team of people to lead, that's really where I got really invested in creating strong cultures. And the larger the organization is, and the more branches it has, or the more departments it has, culture can get kind of tricky because all of those areas seem to have their own cultures. And so, how do
Mm-hmm.
we bring people together so that we're all functioning in a way that's driving us towards a shared vision of what's going to happen? And so, I've been real blessed to be able to kind of, I call it learning, learning on the ropes. It's like I've lived it, and I've seen the good and the bad. I left a job because of bad leadership,
Mm-hmm.
and then found a new role with great leadership that allowed me to even become a stronger leader than what I was previously to that. And um, it also gave me I don't know, the courage, I would say, to actually talk about it and share it, and really talk about how one person can actually make a difference in that environment, whether that is from a cubicle or from a corner office. It doesn't matter, because I tell everybody that leadership is not a title.
Mm-hmm.
Leader is an action. It is a verb. And that means that you're willing to get out there and do things that matter, and you're willing to show up the way people are expecting you to show up, so that they will be willing to follow you and follow that lead to go down the same path.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge advocate of storytelling, huge advocate of culture, and the fact that storytelling is a massive tool that a leader can use to help tell stories, to explain the why, which to me is so important when you want employee engagement as part of your culture. Well, let's talk about your kind of your history or your journey with the book Culture Secrets. So, other than being an advocate or a fan of culture, what were some of the other reasons or goals that you had in writing the book?
So really a lot of it kind of boiled down to the fact that I wanted something that that kind of shared the things that I had learned along the journey, things that
Mm-hmm.
I had learned from other people who were willing to stop and tell me, hey, this worked, this didn't work, this really sucked, or hey, we had great results with this. Like I think shared knowledge is one of the best things that we can do between ourselves as leaders and as people as a whole. Like not having to start from scratch, it puts you so much farther ahead when you can learn from the lessons of others. And I wanted a guide that no matter what level of leadership that you are, because sometimes we think we have to be that CEO or we have to be that president of an organization to be able to make an impact. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not true. Like I said, you can make a difference from a cubicle, just like you can make it from that corner office. It's a matter of how you show up, how you engage people, how you treat them. And, the other thing with that is that I think growing up, I was actually learning culture from my dad. He was a business owner, he was an entrepreneur, he was a hairstylist, and he had his own business for over 50 years, was incredibly successful in that role for him. And I was watching him build this culture day in and day out. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even know it then. I remember going to work with him when I was younger. Like I would be there with him. I would be cleaning mirrors or I'd sweep up hair when he'd do haircuts or whatever, because, there's kind of limited to what you could actually get involved in and,
Mm-hmm.
in a salon at 8, 9, 10 years old. But what I remember distinctly is the time that he took to interact with every one of his customers. And so he knew them personally. He knew their stories. He knew about their family. He knew about the event he was getting them ready for. He knew, like that I was getting them ready for the work week, or either I was getting ready for a daughter's wedding, or I was getting ready for, for some church event or whatever was going on. He knew what made them tick and he knew what mattered to them. And they were loyal customers throughout his entire career. I mean, I know
Mm-hmm.
so many of them I remember as a child, and then even they were at my wedding and later on in life at his funeral, because they had stayed engaged with him and they were so strongly connected to him as a person that it wasn't just because he was a business anymore. It was because they felt like they knew him as a person and he related to them as a friend as well. And that's something you learned over the years. It kind of became ingrained. And that vision of how he built his business and how he was able to create a culture when it wasn't even called culture. That was just the
Mm-hmm.
way he did things because it mattered to him. And the fact that he was an entrepreneur, he was not this huge corporation. So culture matters whether we're our own boss or whether we're someone else's boss, whether it's we're creating an employment engagement or we're creating customer engagement. It can work both ways depending on, I mean, no matter what type of business that you have. And I wanted the book to be a reflection of that. And I wanted it to be something that was super easy for people to remember, and something that would stick with them, that they would be able to carry with them throughout their career and be able to incorporate it as they moved up and down the levels of the organization.
Yeah, I think in the episode we did before, we talked a lot about personal branding, and so with your dad being mostly, I presume, a solo entrepreneur,
Yep.
if he only had the one chair, the culture and personal brand sort of go hand in hand because only one person's involved. But it's really about that engagement and recognition, recognizing the person in the chair who's you cutting your hair as a human being. They have their own story. They're looking for engagement. They're a captured audience. It's almost like being a bartender, right? If you've got regulars
Hmm.
at the bartender, you kind of end up being a therapist of sorts. or just a listening ear for your regulars about what's going on in their life. And I have to imagine your dad did the same, having sat in that chair myself
Mm-hmm.
on a number of occasions in my life, and the conversations I've gotten involved in with perfect strangers. It really does have a major impact on people coming back. They feel like it's an inviting, accepting, non-judgment, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for you, or I'm empathetic, I'm an ear, I want to hear what's going on, and I'm willing to be vulnerable with you about my own life, and so forth. That's what keeps people coming back, and those are hallmarks of a great culture.
Yeah, and that's a huge piece of culture building.
Mm-hmm.
That the way you show up as that leader, that personal brand, are you living the same thing that you're telling people that you're expecting out of them? you know and my dad, for years he was by himself, and then later on he opened up his shop and had one or two people that would rent the chair, but like do chair rental from him or
Yep.
whatever, and have a couple other stations. Um, and most of them stayed for years and years with him because of you know he wasn't afraid to invest in them, share his business knowledge with them. Some of them went on to even open their own places later.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that he wasn't jealous of that fact, or he wasn't like, no, you can't go do your own thing. In fact, he was very celebratory of that, as like, hey, this is a next step for you. And like, you've put in the time, you've trained, and you've done,
Mm-hmm.
and and he was really passionate about working with youth as well. Like, he part of the VOTEC program at the high school, he would go and talk and share about business experiences and everything. And so, that side of the leader, that side of that personal person, is that, I'm willing to mentor, and I'm willing to
Mm-hmm.
share, and I'm willing to invest in that next generation that's coming through here, is just so vital. And it's, as we move like shifting back to the corporate side of things, that's even more important in the corporate world, I think, because we have so many generations in the workplace now, and we're competing for talent in such a different way, and things matter to different people based on our life experiences in different ways, and we have to build all of that in. And so, it can get kind of overwhelming if you let it, about how am I going to do this, how am I going to do that, how am I going to present this idea so that
Mm-hmm.
everybody's on board. But when you're all focused on getting to the same place, and you all have the same value system around you, it's so much easier to get people, no matter where they're coming from, to be part of that solution.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm kind of curious, being that you asked me to do what I did for you when you launched the book. I got access to the book early, so I could
Hmm.
shape my comments based off what you had written. One of the things I really liked that you did in the book was, it wasn't just you. You actively took the time to go find other leaders, business leaders in the world, that have been very successful, and to get their input, their take, their likes, dislikes, their stories, if you will, about culture and their own business and leadership journeys, so that you're adding a lot of credibility to what you're writing, because it's not just about you and your experiences. It's bringing in some folks with some credentials. So, what was that journey like for you? A, to make that decision, and B, go out there and have those conversations, and take the time to go do it.
That was probably my favorite piece of the book, was being able to engage with people who were doing things better than even I was doing them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the thing that just amazes me, and I think people don't understand, um, is that your leadership journey, your professional journey, doesn't need to be a solo journey.
Mm-hmm.
You need to find people that are willing to breathe into you, to share with you, to mentor you. It makes us all so much better collectively and everything. And this book really opened the door, for me to be able to speak to some highly regarded people. But the thing that, that really became very clear is that they were so willing to share because what they had learned had made such an impact in their journey that they wanted to be able to share that with other people so that they can continue having that same impact. People, people are not unwilling to share anything. Like a lot of time, it just takes the fact that you just have to ask to make it happen. And, I'll share a particular instance from the book. One of the people that I got to talk to was Gary Ridge, and he's the CEO at WD-40.
Yep.
And I had followed his messages and his teachings for several years because, in fact, I would strongly say anybody interested in leadership, you need to be listening to what he has to say. Go find his podcast, go find his articles, do whatever you need to do, and
Yeah.
listen to what the man says because he's super super smart in that area. But he wasn't on their website. It was like one of those things like, okay, how am I going to find him? Like you had to do a little, but there were other people on their website and it was kind of like first name, last name at WD-40 company, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what's the chances his email is the exact same thing and it's just not listed? And so I just emailed him and was like, like out of the dark crapshoot, like Gary Ridge doesn't know Chellie Phillips from Man on the Moon. I mean, it's like, and I took a few minutes to tell him, that what I was doing, that I was working on this project and that he had been an inspiration to me in my career for several years. And that I would love to talk to him about some specific things that they were doing there. Like they call themselves a tribe. Their culture is a tribe, and that he has a failure culture. That they, they celebrate mistakes. And I think these are some very big things that people can do. And those were two specific things that I wanted to talk to him about. And so I shared that in the email. And then I also shared a personal story with him. And I told him, I said, whether you talk to me about the book or not, there's one thing I want to share with you. And I want to tell you a story about my grandfather. My grandfather was a World War II vet. He was a farmer, always into something, and of course I loved and adored him. But every time I went to his house, there was a can of WD-40 sitting on the coffee table. And you might think, okay, he's going to use that on some farm equipment or something that he's got out in the barn or the shed. No, my granddad would spray it on his elbows and his knees because somehow or another he decided that WD-40 helped his arthritis. And so I actually took a minute to share that story and told him, I just want you to know, I said, like every time I see the can in the store, that is, I think of my granddad. I mean, it's like it's impossible not to. And um, and I got an email back like within just a couple of minutes of sending it, and he connected me with his assistant and said, I would talk to you if nothing else for you just sharing that story and making my morning. And so it really is sometimes about just making that small connection with somebody and being willing to open yourself up and be a little bit personal, because one of the things that I learned is that one of their values is about making memories. And it's not necessarily about taking the squeak out of something or loosening something, but they're doing those things to be able to make that memory with somebody. Like they're putting a toy back together again, or they're doing that kind of thing. And when I actually got to spend some time talking to him, I didn't know at the time when I sent him that email that, memories were a big part of their values and things that they were doing. And, I couldn't have picked a better story probably to share with him in that, and then how that became a memory for me of my grandfather and how it connected me to that product. And, but he went on and he was so gracious with his time, even went over our allotted appointment time because we were having such a great conversation. And, I probably could have talked to him for 4 hours straight and never ran out of things to ask. But, it's those kind of relationships that you can build and make. And that's one of the reasons to me that I think the book has been as successful as it is because it's not just me telling people my story or my thoughts or my ideas. The stories in that book come from real successful organizations that were happy and willing to share their struggles, their what overcome, and how they've been able to use that to create, the successful businesses that they have.
Wow, what a terrific story! Spraying it on WD-40 kind of reminds me of duct tape. I put it in the same category where it's a product that has 1,000, if not more, uses in it. I always get a kick at times coming from the aviation world. Certain tape, it's made for aviation, but it's in the same lineage, if you will, as duct tape. And there are certain applications and times where the FAA allows an airline, particularly out on the wings, to use this specific aviation tape to seal up areas and allow the plane to still fly its flight. It's not a permanent fix, but to get through the operations of the day until in the middle of the night they can go and really truly put the permanent fix in, you're allowed to do it. And I get a kick at times when I see it show up in social media where people are just aghast that the airlines could use, what looks like duct tape out on the wings or on the airplanes, and they're going to go fly in it, right? But that's just the versatility of the product. It's like WD-40. It's just got
Mm-hmm.
magical uses everywhere. That's such a great story, and I'm glad he responded to you with that. You were adding some value to the conversation, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to just a request. Here's a little bit of value I can put in terms of a story that may create a little bit of a connection even before you
Mm-hmm.
get to meet me, and then led to such a great conversation. Did you have any ahas, out of those conversations that, I didn't really think about that in terms of culture, because you never ran into the situation yourself, or it was just a novel idea that isn't really included with most culture type conversations. Anything of that fell out for you?
A couple of different areas, and like part of that is when you're identifying your values that matter. It's like kind of WD-40, part of their value is the memories, making memories, and
Mm.
and that kind of thing. Like I would have never thought of that probably as a value for that company to begin with. And so I think, to me, that was kind of one of those aha moments, that when we're really coming down with what are our core values for this organization going to be, like what do we want to be known for, like, like, it's not the who, what, when, where. It is the why are we doing this kind of thing, like why are we what is the difference that we're going to make. And we need to make sure that we're really doing that kind of deep look and look at it, because that is where the connections are made with people. That is where the
Mm-hmm.
connections come from your employees. And so I'd say focusing on that, your values are not necessarily, oh, productivity is going to be XYZ this month, or like those are values that you need to meet your productivity goals and different things like that. But don't forget that some of the bigger picture pieces of that, the things that connect people to you and why you're doing the work. The other thing I think is that there's culture kind of has a bad rap. It's kind of it kind of gets talked around in some industries as it's kind of just fluff. I think people think culture
Hmm.
is the swag, the pizza parties, the logoed shirts, the t-shirts we give away, the Taco Tuesdays or something that we do just to keep, that's employee engagement. No, that's not employee engagement. That's more just a day to goof off and have a good time. It is piece of it, because you want your work environment to be fun, because it's been proven scientifically that people who have fun at work are more productive, and they stay longer and everything is great. But that's not culture. That's not really what it is. Culture, it, sometimes you have to not be afraid to get rid of people to build culture. And I think that was one of those aha moments for me. And one of the stories in the book that really illustrates that very well is Stephen Childs, who was or he still is the head HR person for Panasonic Global here in Atlanta, out in Peachtree City.
Peachtree City, yeah.
Yeah. And he was talking about when he took over the role, and that culture was kind of the buzzword, and we need to build culture, is that he went on this expedition of sorts, talking to all these different Fortune 500 companies. They had made their list of they used the best places to work list that these companies made the top of the best places to work list, and he made appointments with them to talk about culture building. And when he came back, he said, I came back with, we need better cafeteria food, we need fancy coffee bars, we need ping pong tables, we need, and he said, yeah, I mean, morale improves a little bit, but it doesn't stay and whatever. And he said, what I, the lesson for him is that that's not culture. Culture is much deeper than that and everything. And that everybody in the organization, the A in my value formula is that accountability piece of it. And everybody has to be accountable for their role in creating that culture. It can't just be one level or another or another. And I think he shares a story that you can read in the book about firing an engineer, because when they shifted to the culture, they made the commitment to train their leadership to be coaching leaders, and they wanted everybody to be on board with that. How do we do that? And they were willing to give people a grace period, like like almost like a 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing. Like, we're going to work with you, we're going to get you there, we're not going to expect you, we're shifting everyone's mindset, and we don't expect you to be there overnight. But they had a particular engineer, and he said he was a fabulous engineer. He was well thought of in the industry. He did a lot of great work, but he really just sucked as a leader in that
Mm-hmm.
organization. Like, his teams didn't want to work with him. People, like, as soon as they got a chance to transfer teams, they were gone, And so, he said they finally had to get to the point where, because he just would not come on board with it, that they gave him a nice letter that says, you're a great engineer, but we no longer want you to work here. And so being okay with letting people go that don't align with where you want to go and the type of atmosphere you want to create and the type of leaders that you want to have, that can be a hard decision in a business to make, because
Yeah.
maybe they are very creative in their job, or they're innovative and they're doing big things, but they're also destructive in another way that can be even more detrimental to you than what they're creating and bringing positive to that side of the organization.
Yeah, a very common problem in the technical world, businesses that are in the technical world, is thinking that skill, competency, proficiency, and excellence on the engineering side immediately translates to leadership. I saw it all the time with my previous employer over on the aviation side, and people, leaders that were thinking about promoting people to those roles, don't give like little test projects or whatever to them in the leadership. They're not paid for it, but sort of like a project lead or something of that
Hmm.
nature, to give them opportunity to showcase some leadership skills and see if they're ready for it. And if you don't do that and test it and remove that kind of red flag, then you don't want to do it.
Right.
They're still a great technical team member and get the job done from the engineering side. You still want them around, but you need to figure out a different route to find a good leader for the team. I had another thought. Anyway, engagement. So culture is an environment. It's kind of the mixture of the why and the how, with the values that you espouse to and want to exist or being the driving force within your culture need to be identified. That's, as you stated before, that's why it's important that you don't want to say your values are that we're going to have a certain level of productivity. That's not a value.
Right.
A value is more along the lines of values like empathy or emotional safety or respect or recognition. Things like that are value statements that you want to not only state, but your actions of your leadership and others within the community, in which case the community is your business, are going to live up to. In other words, if you just were a fly on the wall and was just watching all the interactions during the day, you could jot down in your journal instances where those values actually showed up in actions or conversations or whatever it may be through the course of the day. What do you feel like are some important foundational values or cornerstones, if you will, of a culture that leads to success for a business? What would you put your finger on?
So, values are very personal and they're different for every organization. Um, there's some basic human values that
Mm-hmm.
I think we all need to, like we want to be trustworthy, we want to be, empathetic, like you said, we want to be respected, we
Mm-hmm.
want to be honest, we want to be transparent. There's a lot of those human values that can translate into the corporate world as well. And one of the things that I really think is critical for leaders to do in that organization is to get their team involved with those values, because the way I lay out the process, and you've had a chance to read through the book, I use that value
Mm-hmm.
statement, the value acronym for building culture, and it's vision, accountability, leadership, the uniqueness of your people, and then you ultimately drive that engagement that you get. And so if you take that first piece, that vision piece, and that values piece, is like you've got to create that vision based on values, but it can't be your vision alone. You have to have your team input on that. And I think a lot of times that's where things go wrong, is when we sit in an office and we say, okay, these are the values that matter. Well, they may matter to you, but they may not matter to some of your other team members, or they may have some stronger feelings about other values that really need to be, oh, well, that is what we're doing and that is why it matters. And so I
Or
think one
it doesn't translate into their area of the
of
business.
work,
I mean,
correct.
I had that issue.
hmm And so, I think one of the biggest things that you can do, like when you start investing in culture building, whether it's on your team or whether it's organization wide, I think you need to sit down and have a discussion from everybody and get the input of what will our 5 values be as this team.
Hmm.
Because when you can create those values together, what that does is it allows you to set a set of behaviors then, that we're going to do X, Y, and Z because that's going to exemplify this value. And so when you can create the behavior expectations based on this value system that we've all agreed upon is what we're going to do and how we're going to get there, and that gets us to that vision that we've created, then you have everything in place that you need as a team leader at that point in time, because you have the continuity of everybody involved. They're all on the same page. They're all heading in the same direction. They've all got the same mindset that this is what matters to us all, and that's what's going to get us to the success point that we've agreed that we're going to. And then you have the behaviors, which, as a leader, we all have to come up with. We have our mid-year evaluations, our end of the year evaluations, all of those things that we have to do to performance evaluate, you name it. Like there's all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
things that we have to do. But when you have that defined set of behaviors, there's no question as to what I'm looking for as your leader when we're having this discussion twice a year or quarterly or whatever it is that you're doing inside your organization. If you are showing up doing these things day in and day out, you are going to be living our values and pushing us toward that vision that we have. And so, as far as values goes, I don't think there's necessarily one specific value that you have to have. I do think that they have to be a shared set of values, and
Mm-hmm.
that is very individual to each organization as they come.
Yeah, I think that the foundation of the values, the gotta haves for me are those kind of heart centered human being kind of based values that in my mind every organization should have, because we're all people based.
Mhm.
There is no such thing as a completely computer based organization that I've seen yet. where
Somebody
everything
had to
is done by
program it.
computers, right? Well, somebody had to program it, and in that programming, values had to be put into it. If you don't understand that, go watch a movie called iRobot. Um, from from that perspective, but the rest of it, if you lay that as a foundation, other items that you can stack on top of it that are values can be unique to your organization, and don't have to be the same as everybody else. So it's like a common layer foundational that are human centered ones that everybody should have. And then on top of it are values that can be different, but still human centric, and there's still going to be thriving communities because of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think, as that leader, the L in the value thing is leader
Mm-hmm.
is in my value formula that I use. And that leader is responsible for showing up and
Mm-hmm.
being that beacon for I want you to emulate these things that matter. So if I want you to care about the person sitting in the cubicle next to you, I've got to show you that I care about you.
Yep.
I need to be respectful when I'm having a conversation with you. If I want you to be respectful with the customer on the phone that you're having the conversation with, you know, so it really is, it's hard for me to separate personal branding from culture building, because how I show up as a person, as that leader, how I deal with my team, how I deal with my customers is such a
Yep.
reflection on the overall culture that comes about, that you can't have one without the other, as far as I'm concerned. Um, I guess you could have a bad culture if you
Yeah.
have really bad leadership, but but if you want it to be thriving and successful, and you want your people to be, happy to be there, you want them to be long-term employees, you want them to be engaged, you want them to feel part of the success of the organization, and that their contributions are valued and mattered every day, then you cannot do that as a leader that does not invest in the people side of the organization.
Yeah. Two things that I feel like companies don't do well over and over and over again is, one, those that have some kind of bonus systems or systems that compensate based on actions. And typically those systems are based off financial performance. And they don't build into it sort of the human or the heart based or the values. Those got to have values are not built into the bonus system, right? So what are you incentivizing? You're incentivizing behavior that brings about financial results at whatever cost. And a lot of times that's human cost, whether it be people leaving the company or a bad reputation or a bad brand or a bad culture or whatever it may be, is not thought about when those systems are built. The other is, how do you build that into your hiring,
So
right?
I love
So,
that.
so in the hiring process, we build a job description. We're hiring a candidate or a person for this position, and all the questions and all of the activity is geared around skills and talent and experience and whatever, but nothing is done about um, how well of a fit is this person into our culture. I'm starting to see a little movement in the proper way towards that, but for the most part, you get instances where a person comes in, and yeah, they can do the job, they can do the activities, but they're not a good fit within the team or in the business or whatever, because we didn't look or ask about that or pay attention to that in the hiring process or even the onboarding process. The explanation of, we're going to ask you to do these things in your job, and here's the reasons behind why we ask you to do that. Are you willing to do that? And the answer is no, then okay, there's the door. Sorry, we made a mistake in hiring you.
So I totally agree that, like hiring is one of the biggest impacts that you can have on culture in the
Hmm.
organization. And, who people have to work with on a day-to-day basis is so impactful on how they feel about showing up for work too. And a lot of times those people don't have any say so in who's coming in next to them or whatever. And so it is, to me, it is crucial that you have that defined culture, vision, value statement before you start looking for people to be in that. And when you have your team that has been part of that, developing that, then you're all agreeing that these are the kind of things that we're looking for in the people that we're bringing
Hmm.
into this team. And you do have to build that into the job description at some point. Is like there are going to be like when you have defined those behaviors that you're going to take the values and say, well, if we do these things, that means these values are going to be part of what we're doing. Then you have some language that you can use in your job description at that
Hmm.
point in time about some of the metrics that you're wanting them to do, whether it's customer focused, whether it's innovation, whether it's teamwork, problem, like there's different things that you can build into that job description that will give people an idea of what your culture actually is. But then I think the interview is the time that you really, really need to focus on why that person is there and what impact that they're going to have on your team.
Hmm.
You probably would not be interviewing them if you did not think they had the skills. So to me, the skill focused part of what they're doing is probably, a 20-25% part of the interview to me, because they wouldn't have made it through the vetting process. They wouldn't have made it through maybe your initial, prep calls or whatever if they did not have the skills that were there. So you use the interview time for me and it goes back to that storytelling that we were talking about. Ask them to tell you how they have done these things in
Hmm.
previous, you
Yep.
know, and like make them give you actual examples of, you know, a team situation that failed and how did we recover from that. Ask hard questions. They don't have to be like, oh, tell me your biggest strength and your weak, like that's I mean, like, anybody can answer those any way they want. But when you ask me, so have you ever led a team that failed, and as the leader of that team, how did you come past that? How did you grow from it? And how did you fix it going forward?
Hmm.
That's a much stronger question than tell me your greatest strength, like, because it actually shows the thought process that people put through it, how they engaged with other people, what they learned from it. Because, like a lot of times you can teach skill, but you can't teach being a human being. And so if I can't learn from failure, if I can't learn from mistakes, if I can't learn from, or I am blind to see that there's areas I need to work on as a person, then I can't help you down the road, like. And
Yep.
so, like being able to focus on those parts inside that interview is really a great thing. And then I always think it's great that if you can involve other people that are going to be working with them in that hiring practice, that is a time that you that way they can get a feel for what would it be like to work next to them. In fact, I'll tell you, Rich Sheridan is another person that I interviewed in the book, and he's the founder, and he calls himself the chief storyteller for Menlo Innovation. It's a tech company, and they do tech very differently there. um, and so he was telling me about the interview process that they do. They bring in 3 people when they do an interview, and they interview them at the same time. And each one is told, your job is to convince me the other person is the better hire. Now that's kind of an awkward place to be put in when you're
Yeah.
you're the candidate there for the. But he said what it shows them is how they treat other people, how they recognize other skills, you know, how they, like, as that leader, sometimes you have to make the hard decision of who I'm going to put teams together with and different things like that. And so putting them in that situation together, he said it's not about them coding. He said they wouldn't have made it, to the interview if we hadn't have seen the examples of their work and knew they could code. And he said most everybody who makes it this far, we know they've got the skills, but I
Hmm.
want to know how they're going to impact my team. And then they build their teams a little differently there. And so going through that interview process that way, when they do become employees there, they already know, they have that expectation, is that my job is to take care of that person next to me as well. It's not just about me being this solitary coder sitting in a cave with my headphones on, staring at my computer all day long. In fact, they code in teams. And he said those teams rotate every week. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it's every week you're working with somebody different on code. And he says what it allows them to do is to recognize problems so much faster, because when coding is solitary, he said you go through the whole thing, you don't realize until the end that something's not working.
Yeah.
And so when I have all these eyes and all these people in it, the code's much better. We identify mistakes or problems much faster. We fix them, and it becomes more it's not me. It's we. And so, there are particular things that you can do to make sure that the people that you're bringing into your organization are the right fit. Now, do we get it right all the time? No. There are some people that show up really great in an interview. They've been coached really well. They know how to do those kind of things. And then when you put them with other people, that's not the same person you interviewed.
Yeah. They
I
can
think we've
talk the
all been
talk, but not walk the walk.
right. And I think that's what that 90-day, that probationary period that you have is for. And I think people need to not be afraid to say, you have great skill, but you're not a fit for us. Just like, Stephen was talking about at Panasonic, is that we gave you a chance and you're just not showing up the way we need you to show up. And go ahead and get rid of the problem before it sits there for 5, 10, 15 years and festers on and on and on. And that takes a strong leader. Nobody likes to fire anybody. Nobody wants that kind of. It's not a good day for any person. It's not a good day for that supervisor. It's not a good day for the person involved. I mean, it's like it makes everybody's day a bad day. But it is the best for the organization at times to be able to say, is like, you are not a fit anymore. And for us to both have a great experience doing what we're doing, then we need to make sure that that is not what's happening anymore.
Yeah. Couldn't agree anymore. Check all those boxes, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
One last question. And we talked a little bit about it in the green room. How would somebody translate your thoughts, both through your interview process and your own thoughts about culture? You're talking about personal brand. One in my coaching business, I like to use business language to talk about the individual person and the client sitting on the other side of the computer screen or the table or whatever. That there's not a lot of difference between a human being and a business. So a company has a brand. We have a personal brand. Company has a culture. We have a culture, right? So the culture exists. For those that are on audio, I'm circling my body here. There's a culture that's inside of us that exists because we live our life with certain values and other things that are the makeups of a culture and a company. They're a makeup of a human being and their life from that perspective. So do you think somebody reading your book could read through it and then take that notion or that context and go, okay, I think I have enough knowledge from this book that I could sit down with my own life and think about what's my why in life? What's the values that I feel like I want to live my life through? How's my interaction with my teammates? In this case, teammates are family, friends, neighbors, teammates in an organization, maybe a nonprofit or something I do on the side that's not money making for me and my family or whatever it may be. That this notion in this book from a self-leadership perspective gives you enough to work from that you can not only think about it in your business, particularly if you're a leader or a business owner, but then how does it translate to myself in my own life?
Yeah, I think it translates seamlessly, because at the core of culture is that leader, is that person that's willing to step out and do that, and that is a personal mission that you're on. And it does translate. Like you have cultures in your family, you have cultures in your church, you have cultures in the organizations that you're part of, and so culture impacts us everywhere. And I do think that that value formula, like if you walk through that value formula, if you identify your core values and the vision that you have for your life, let's just say, let's just talk life personally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I want to show up for my family? How do I want to show up for my friends? How do I want to show up for the people that are counting on me? If you identify, if I ask 5 people, how do you see me? What are the 3 things that you immediately think of me? Are there going to be those 5 values that you feel like this is what I want to be known for? This is what
Mm-hmm.
matters to me. Whether it's honesty, whether it's trust, whether it's dependability, whether it is faith, whether any of these things can be the value that you have. But you need to do that deep reflection and see, am I showing up that way for everybody? Would someone say that I am dependable? Have I always shown up where I told people I was going to show up? Have I always been trustworthy? Have I told them the truth?
Mm-hmm.
Have I lived those things in my day-to-day life? And so if you start with just that V, that identifying those values and that vision, then that leads us, like we have to be authentic to who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to show up that way every day. And when we define what those are, because they are something that truly matters to us, it's much easier to show up that way. We don't have to think about it. They become ingrained in who we are. And, you know, I'll say our values change over life. Like my values now at 50 are probably not the same as they were when I was in my 20s.
Right.
And so, and that comes from experience and what matters. And
Mm-hmm.
you learn how it feels to be treated different ways, or you learn from, disappointments that you've gone through. You go through tragedies, you go through sorrowful times, you go through grief, you go through all of these things, and they all add to your box of emotions and experience, and that, okay, I don't want someone else to feel this way, so I'm going to always try to be X, Y, and Z. And so you know, I think it's something that culture can evolve and your values can evolve. And, that's the thing. I think is something that it's not something that becomes very stagnant. We need to
Mm-hmm.
be reflective on it. And it's something that we need to look at over and over again. So if you identify those values, whether that's corporate or personal, that's something that you can live in both worlds, my personal world or my business world. And then accountability. If I've agreed that these are my values, this is how I'm going to show up. And I'm going to do everything I can. I think one of the things that we can do in life is have our own accountability partners. In the business world, we call them mentors probably, or they're our supervisors, or their training that we go to or whatever. But I have that circle of people in my life that are going to call me out if I'm doing something that is not in alignment with what I say I'm doing, or if it crosses a line, they're going to be the very ones that look at me and go, well, are you sure that's what you want to do? Because this is what you said. Or, like, hey, you're showing up this way and that's not you. So what's going on in your life? There's got to be something going on that's making you act a different way than normal right now. And we need those truth tellers in our life. And we need to be those truth tellers for those people that we let into our circle, that we really count on, that we believe on. And so, I say, you know, that accountability piece is what I'm willing to show up for. I'm willing to be called out on it. I'm willing to learn from my mistakes. I'm willing to grow from them. But I'm also willing to tell others that I need you to show up this way for me,
Mm-hmm.
and not be afraid to have those conversations as well. And then the L is the leadership part, is like, and that's just leading by example. Like if I'm going to talk the talk, I'm going to walk the walk. And that doesn't matter if you're a father. It doesn't matter if you're a
Mm-hmm.
mother. It doesn't matter if you're a sister. It doesn't matter if you're a student in a classroom. It doesn't matter if you're a leader in the office. I'm going to agree that I want people to see me this way. I'm going to show up that way. And I'm not going to give people a reason to doubt that that's who I am and what's going on. And then recognizing the uniqueness of other people. We're not all the same. We all have our different life experiences that turn us into who we are as adults, as teenagers, as everything else. But recognizing that there is value in everyone. And, taking the time to really get to know someone, to find out what that value is, what makes them unique, what's in their background that's made them the way that they are. That's where you build that personal connection.
Yep.
And the stronger our personal connections are with each other outside of the office in our personal worlds, the better those relationships are going to be. Whether that's a husband-wife relationship, whether that's a father-child relationship, whether that's, a siblings relationship, it's amazing to me how many siblings, once they grow up, don't get along. It's like, I'm like, I'm very lucky. I have a brother that I love and adore. And I told him one time, several years ago, this has been several years, I told him, what until I went to college that I realized I really liked you, and it was because we spent all of our middle school and high school years fighting all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, because he was 4 years younger, always wanting to be in something. I was too grown to be cool to be hanging out with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't until I went away that I realized I missed him being around all the time, because he did have some great qualities, and I did love him and I did care about him. And so, we joke about it now, that we're way grown up now, but that's the truth, is that you have to take the time to get to know someone and really value what they bring to your
Mm-hmm.
life. That's also in your personal life, because you can't always do it in the business world, depending on where you work, but you also need to know when to walk away from some people, because their values and your values don't align anymore. And, what they're doing is not going to, their relationship is not going to improve, because we're never going to be on the same page. And I don't need to continue fighting and investing in this when I can be investing in others,
Yep.
that relationship is much more solid and much more impactful to what's going on. And then that engagement is like showing up, being an active part of something, being happy to be there, taking the time to acknowledge that someone else matters, that you recognize the importance of what they're doing, that you recognize their value in the family or their value in that organization, what they're bringing to the table, that you're giving yourself the opportunity to engage with them, which is about you giving up something that is super precious to you. That's your time. And when I'm saying that my time is worth giving to you, and I want to engage with you, whether that is through conversation, or whether I'm watching a movie with you, or whether we're out playing in the yard or doing whatever it is, that engagement, that time where I know that we have that one-on-one, where I am totally involved with what's happening to you, is so vital in us building those strong relationships that we talk about. So I think the culture building formula that you find in that book really does translate to your personal life as well. And, you can use it not only on yourself, but as on the other members of your family and organizations, and, work through it together. How awesome would that be to sit down with your kids and go, let's come up with the 5 values that our family are going to exemplify. And then we're going to come up with the behaviors that I'm going to ask you at supper at night. Like, how have you shown somebody today that you were honest? How have you shown somebody today that you were trustworthy?
Yeah.
And you just rebuild that into that fabric of who you are and who your family is. You know, all relationships take work, and at the core of it, people want to feel like one of our basic human needs is the feeling of belonging. And that's what that culture building does. It gives us all that connection, and it makes us feel like we belong and part of something.
Yeah. Can you imagine the power if husband and wife called a family meeting and sat down and said, we're going to figure out what the why of this family is, and the values and the culture that we want it to be, and you get to have an input in that. Maybe not the final decision, but you're going to have input into it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. To think that might actually happen in this world. I would be just flabbergasted if somebody told me that they thought of
That
that and
they'd
actually
actually done
sat
it.
down and did it. I applaud. I might stick them all over social media and so forth out of it to show them as an example of.
All right, that's your listener's challenge. We want to know
Well,
who's
that's your
doing
listeners'
that out
chat. Yeah,
there.
who's doing it out there, right? Because we want to we want to recognize you, applaud you, and get you to be a spokesperson for culture out there, to say, yeah, it's important enough to me that we sat down and did this as a family, or as a couple that did it for themselves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Imagine if I think I'd scare some women away if I went out on a date and started dating a woman, and about the fourth date said, "Okay, I kind of like you. Let's think about what the why of our relationship's going to be." Maybe go, "What? What? Are you crazy?" Anyway, our time is coming to a close, and I can't thank you enough, Chellie, for coming out and sharing your wisdom with us again. What's the best way people can find your book or reach you, get engagement with you, hire you for your services, whatever it may be?
Books on Amazon, or you can go to my website, which is chellephillips.com. Um, I'm also all over LinkedIn, Facebook, and all the social profiles. I love to engage on social, so I'm pretty much a prolific poster. You will find stuff from me pretty much every week, whether it's a blog post or whether it's sharing some tidbit of leadership advice or information or asking for feedback on something. So
Mm.
I love for your followers
Or
to
share your unique WD-40 story.
there you go. Like whatever it is, like say I heard your podcast, I was listening to you talk to Andy, and I was like, hey, here we go.
Here,
Give me what you
give
know.
me your best shot. Give me your best shot. What? I got 1 out of 1,000 uses. What's your 1 out of 1,000 uses for
There you go.
WD-40? All right, one last question. You and I talked about it in the green room. We have to twist it a little bit since you're the first revisitor, if you will, to the podcast. So, well, what do the words generate your value mean in the context of culture, do you think?
So, we've kind of talked around that
Mm-hmm.
this whole conversation, but what I think it really means as far as culture is that, generating that value of that culture means that you're building for the future. It means that the people that are going to be involved in it feel heard. They feel like their skills and their talents are being recognized. They feel like they're part of that solution. And then it means that you've got the right people leading that organization because they're in alignment and accountable for the decisions that are made. And so their value, what they're generating, the value that they're generating is the leadership at that point in time is totally invested in the people that are doing the work, making sure that they're seen, making sure they're getting the training that they need, making sure that they have the tools that they need to do what they're going to need to be doing. And then your employee base is also generating that value from the interactions that they have with the customers and with each other, whether that's from building that relationship so that they're a repeat customer, or whether it's because you're getting that endorsement from them and they're telling their other connections in the business world is, hey, you need to do business with them because they're going to show up, they're going to deliver, they're going to do what they say they're going to do, and the product's going to be extremely well made, or the service is going to be crafted in a way that meets our absolute needs. And so I do think generating your value is perfect for culture building because it ties into all aspects, whether it's the financial success of the organization, the people success of the organization, or the vision and direction that that organization has.
Yep, all the above. Reasons why I call my business Generate Your Value and why it's so important to me is because it hits in so many areas about life, particularly when it relates to culture and personal brand. So, Chellie, can't thank you enough for coming back on the podcast. It means a lot to me. You're willing to come back for a second time. And if I had met somebody on the street and they told me, "Hey, I'm in the business, building a business plan. I'm going to start a business. What would be 10 books you would recommend to me to go read to help me out on the start of my journey?" Chellie's book, Culture Secrets, would be in that top 10 list
I appreciate that so
of
much.
books to go read on a very important subject when it comes to business and success in that realm. So that being said, we're here every Tuesday. Can't thank you once again enough for joining us to hear the stories of people just as great as Chellie is in their success and in life, so that you might be able to get some golden nuggets out of our conversation to integrate into your business or into your life from a self-leadership perspective to help you find those great things called joy, happiness, and success in your life. So episodes come out every Tuesday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the episodes. And I'll finish up by saying have a great day, have a great week, and we'll see you here next time on the Generate Your Value podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Generate Your Value podcast. If you find our conversations to be useful in your life, I invite you to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode.
You can find me online at Instagram at _Zach.Levy, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
For information on my coaching services, visit my website at www.generateyourvalue.com. You can also find me and my company on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram. Simply search for Generate Your Value on those platforms.
Once again, thanks for joining us for today's podcast, and we invite you to generate your value in this world.